All right, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting. Bit of a confusion there, but we finally got Kyle on board. Kyle, great to have you. Let's get rolling, folks. So welcome to today's Sovryn. My name is Magnus. We're joined by Cal from Edge and Node, also at The Graph, Betsy Braddock, Lemmy Lebu, Iago as well as joining us for a great Twitter discourse. Guys, don't forget Twitter Spaces are interactive. At the end, we'll take questions. Also, you can submit questions anonymously. People love to do that. You click on the link in our latest tweet. As you know, if you're an avid listener of Sovereignty, I like to start things off with a little joke as an icebreaker. Here we go. Why did the man put his crypto in the freezer? He wanted cold storage. Thank you, folks. Thanks so much. If you can explain your role at Edge and Node in a nutshell, how you founded The Graph, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry for the boomer alert on me not being able to get in, but appreciate your patience. Just for some context, Edge and Node is the founding team behind The Graph. It was founded back in 2017 by three pretty amazing dudes, Yaniv Tal, Brandon Ramirez, and Jonas Pullman. We now have 50 people across 6 continents, and we're only one of 6 core developer teams working on technology and ecosystem, in addition to Masari, which is a core subgraph developer for the ecosystem as well. And though the team was originally called The Graph after the launch of the decentralized network about a year and a half ago, a little over, Edge and Node was created, and The Graph is now solely a protocol. Has no employees. It's just a layer of tech and good, a public good for the world to use. And I oversee BDM partnerships at Edge and Node, working on the ecosystem, though I, like many folks on the team, help with a lot of their stuff. I help with developer success, lower level tech support, marketing operations, anything else really that's needed to help make The Graph reach its full potential.
Nice one. Yeah, a lot of us at Sovryn actually are really excited to have you on, in particular Betsy, who's joining us. And Betsy, go ahead and unmute yourself. Could you tell us about your role at Sovryn and what excites you about The Graph, how you're using it?
For sure. And Kyle, really, really great to meet you. And yeah, great to have you on. I've been absolutely loving using The Graph recently. Yeah, my role at Sovryn, I'm a backend developer working on Sovryn's backend data services. So a really big part of that is The Graph. Sort of in a nutshell, the way that we're using The Graph. So Sovryn is built on RSK. We're kind of a Bitcoin-focused DeFi platform built on RSK. And originally, when I kind of started working at Sovryn, right back when we started, we had kind of built like a home-built blockchain indexing solution for ourselves, which was kind of like a poor man's version of The Graph, not nearly as good or reliable, but that's kind of what we were using. And then Remy, who is here, and Magnus, if you could give Remy an invite to be a speaker as well, that'd be awesome. But yeah, he joined the team, and he was like, "Why aren't you guys using The Graph? The Graph's amazing." So yeah, we kind of migrated the stuff we'd built ourselves that we were having tons of issues with. That was taking a ton of maintenance. That was just a massive headache, and we kind of rebuilt that as a subgraph, which has made my life a million times better, and been a lot happier since then. And we've kind of deployed it recently as a kind of self-hosted version, because I know that The Graph hasn't added support for RSK, although we're hoping for that in the future. So right now we're running a self-hosted subgraph and absolutely loving it. Yeah, that's sort of it in a nutshell.
Love it. Great to hear. Yeah, I mean, that's the point of The Graph, right? To unblock builders, to save time. And what Graph is doing is decentralizing data indexing, query services in general. Right now, as you said, RSK is not integrated, but we have 39 chains and networks on the hosted service in the Graph ecosystem. We're speaking with many dozens more, and we'll hopefully index all networks across the entire blockchain's ecosystem to make it to where people don't have to manually sift through transactions on Etherscan or whatever else they're using, or just run their own servers, index the data themselves, and build and maintain their own APIs, which wastes scarce and really expensive developer resources that should be spent on building and improving your core product and services. So it's great to hear you figured out a solution, and I'm sure we'll talk about the roadmap going forward on how we can get RSK and build other chains and networks integrated as well.
Yeah, that would be absolutely really, really cool. The plan long term, hopefully, if we could move kind of I know you guys are kind of moving towards the decentralized network, so if we could kind of get the Sovryn subgraph onto the decentralized network, eventually that would be absolutely amazing. And yeah, like you said, it really allowed us to instead of spending all that time and effort focusing on, building out that kind of generic blockchain indexing framework, which, to be honest, we would never have been able to do as well as the graph does it. Like things like handling like chain reorgs and all that kind of stuff is so complicated. And so making sure that you're doing all that error handling properly and all that kind of stuff it's a ton of maintenance. And you guys have just handled that so beautifully and really allowed us to focus on the business logic, focus on, what's specific to Sovryn, how do we want to present the data that's specific to Sovryn, rather than, spending a lot of time building out that kind of core framework.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. And it's not just, the 100 to 200 folks on the core dev teams. It's, many, many hundreds, if not thousands across the world, really, that are helping this thing grow. And the point of this is to have a public good that the world can use, that no one owns and controls outright, no one takes all the economics out of. That's our values orientation, and that's what we're building towards, so that everyone in the world can use this, and no one team, no one person is taking all economics and having complete control. So yeah, that's what we're aiming for, and I think we'll get there.
That's really cool. It's like I read, I think ages ago, that the graph was kind of like a Google for blockchains, but I think it's like a Web3 version of Google for blockchains where no one's owning it, right? No one's using the data. Like it's not like anyone's sort of being mined for their data or anything like that. It's like the data is for everyone, owned by everyone, and indexable by everyone. So yeah, it's like a really, really non-evil version of Google, which is really cool.
Yeah, don't be evil.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Web3 in general. I think it's verifiability and transparency. It's ownership. It's decentralized infrastructure driving decentralized applications, which adds a ton of resiliency and robustness. And then shared governance, which for the first time in the world, in the history of human species, all of these things are coming together and are actually potentially a reality, but we need to build the tech plumbing underneath to make it a reality. So that's, and there's lots of different protocols working on this. The graph is one of them, working on the data and query layer. But yeah, that's super important to us, and that's our North Star, and we reiterate that daily across the team and ecosystem.
So Remy, he is also on board. His username is Aku. Did you want to unmute yourself? Go ahead.
Hey guys, so my Sovryn name is Remy. Here I'm known as Aku. I am with Betsy, one of the backend developers for the Sovryn protocol, taking care of the data services for the DApp and for the protocol in general. Yeah, and as Betsy mentioned, I introduced the Graph protocol to the Sovryn protocol and kind of pushed towards moving our data services to be as dependent on the Graph as possible, because it's really a good match to our needs. And it's been successful.
That's great. Also, I have to say, I've been a long-time follower of what you all are doing. So thanks for what you're doing for the world as well. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. And just another thing I wanted to say is one of the main things that kind of drawn us to the direction of the graph is the ability that we'll be able, at some point in the future, once RSK is supported by the graph, to be able to decentralize our backend services, which is a major goal of ours, which is something that was a big decision point for us for using the graph. And we're really looking forward for RSK to being supported.
I love it. Me too.
What percentage of subgraphs are expected to move to the decentralized network? Is it easier to have support for new chains like RSK to decentralized network?
Well, maybe we can talk about the kind of deprecation in general. Do you want me to kind of go over just to make sure people have context, or do you want to jump right into RSK and assume everyone already has an idea?
A little context would be great, actually.
Sure. So the Graph ecosystem recently at Graph Day, the second we've ever held, set a roadmap to deprecation of the hosted service for all decentralized network-enabled chains. And that's paving the way to just full employment of the decentralized network by all projects on all chains integrated with the Graph. And each new chain integration with the network will have multiple phases of deprecation, just like what's happening with the Ethereum mainnet. And the core devs have a lot of work to do because, again, right now, 39 chains and networks integrated with the Graph. We hope to, if not plan to, get all of them across by the final deprecation timeline of end of Q1 2023. Though right now, again, each one will take a phased approach, and we'll take it one chain at a time to make sure it scales out perfectly and nothing breaks as we're going through. And if you're thinking about a timeline for RSK, naturally, we want the graph to be accessible for everyone so that decentralization and dApps in general are true, and is not just, and Web3 is not a pipe dream with centralized choke points. So eventually we want to make a type of SDK package to where everyone will just be able to plug into the decentralized network themselves without interference or necessary integrations with the core dev teams. That's the dream. Again, we plan to make it happen. We just don't know when. With regards to the deprecation, that's definitely a priority, and we hope to get all those across that are currently integrated by the end of Q1 next year. And then at that point, we'll probably pull our heads above water, take a breath, see where things are going, and then take another long breath and go right back to it, and hopefully start integrating chains directly onto the decentralized network, because we have been subsidizing the hosted service for years. It costs many millions of dollars a year, and it's given us time to build something out for the world, the decentralized network that's scaling across chain. But it's time to hang up the hat for the hosted service. It's served its purpose. And with regards to RSK, no timeline. It'd be good to check in at the end of the year, if not early next year, to see how things are going and see if we can start integrating by then. It's likely no, but it's not definitely a no. And we'll just keep checking in every few weeks or month. You can ping me directly either on Telegram, Twitter, or Discord, and I'll give you an update as much as possible once we have a little bit more light on the path that we're going to be taking over the next few quarters. So sorry, I can't give you an exact date. We'll never really give any dev timeline specifically, as much as possible, but that's our path ahead until probably April 2023.
I did actually have an anonymous question in here. Someone submitted. They asked, what is the most impressive or creative thing that you've seen in team build using the graph?
Well, if you look at the scale of the graph, I think so far it's just the sheer mass, the massive amount of subgraphs. Right now on the hosted service, over 27,000 subgraphs. There's been, I think, 32,000 lifetime developers. There's over 60,000 lifetime subgraphs. And so when you think of what the graph powers, it's pretty much every massive AMM on any chain. So Uniswap for Ethereum, QuickSwap for Matic, PancakeSwap for BSC, Uniswap for Celo, and so on. So if you think of SpookySwap for Phantom, all these different chains and all these massive AMMs and exchange dexes in general are powered by the graph, to where their analytics pages, and Uniswap's analytics page wouldn't work without the graph. And that's before getting into the massive NFT marketplaces like Foundation, Decentraland, and other really big NFT projects. And then you look at wallets, and then you look at identity protocols, and so on. So what has surprised me most is the sheer scale at how much of the blockchain ecosystem relies on the graph in a cross-chain world. Again, right now, 39 chains, but imagine when there's 60 or 80 or 100, and everyone can just plug in, use decentralized infrastructure, and truly call their application a dApp. With regards to individual instances, there's been so many that are so impressive. I don't think I could pick out any, but I guess to answer that, it'd be the sheer scale of what the graph is powering across the entire ecosystem.
I have a question about the move to the decentralized service from the hosted service. When you were talking about it, you kind of said that the graph team was kind of going to port everything across. Like, just out of interest, if someone had like a subgraph on the hosted service, did they have to do anything to move it to the decentralized service, or are you guys kind of making all of those subgraphs just automatically available to the indexers? So even if the teams didn't do anything, they just kind of almost seamlessly move onto the decentralized service?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that I'm in thousands of chats explaining, literally thousands of chats with all these projects. And it's been a friction point for sure. And we're hoping to make it smooth over time. But as opposed to hosted service where you deploy to Studio and you publish, on the decentralized network, you deploy, you publish and curate, which means you put GRT on your subgraph in the same transaction to attract indexers. Then you create an API key, which is a wallet. You fill that with GRT, and then you migrate your API on the front end. So it's deploying to Subgraph, publishing and curating, getting indexers to pick it up, creating an API key, and then changing the one line of code in the front end to query the network as opposed to the hosted service. And that's something that has been something that people are getting used to. It's not incredibly hard. You can do it in really 20, 30 minutes. We could do it all on a phone call. But that's why there's a migration grant program. That's why I and multiple solutions engineers and dev success folks are on call 24/7 unless we're asleep, helping everyone to get used to this. And we're happy to do it because of what it's doing for the world and how much we believe in it. And so there's a couple more steps. And then naturally, you just need to pay all query fees and GRT. So you have to keep your API key or billing balance above zero. And in the future, we're even working on some more seamless solutions to this with potentially fiat on-ramps or subscription services or so on. We're looking at many different things. We're not sure exactly what it'll look like, but the feedback is clear that it needs to get simpler, it needs to get more seamless, and it'd be great if we could abstract a lot of this stuff in the back end. So TBD on that, but we're pushing hard for it.
I really like how it made a decentralized kind of business model for pay-per-use. With the, when developers would fund a wallet with GRT, right, to pay for the query fees, does that all happen on chain? I'm assuming that the sort of per query fee would happen off chain, right? Because it would have to happen fast enough for an API response to be in reasonable time, or have you made a way for that to happen all on chain?
Sure. So the microtransactions happen in something called Scalar that Zach Burns on our team created that helps batch all that. But if you think of where it happens with regards to transactions, everyone right now puts GRT into the system on Ethereum, and then they bridge it to Polygon. The API key is on Polygon, and those are wrapped up weekly. So the invoices are weekly, and they're paid on Polygon. So everything is on chain. You can see the transactions on chain. Everything's tracked. You can track it in subgraphs. We actually have subgraphs powering, the Web3 index and token terminals, vision of what's going on with regards to fees. So yeah, it's definitely on chain, which is what we believe. We don't want anything to be opaque in any way. We want transparency to the fullest as much as possible.
So basically what you're saying is if I have a graph on, say, Binance, I would be paid on Polygon, or would have to pay on Polygon?
Correct. Right now, that's the process. If more chains were on the decentralized network, we have announced that a GIP, Graph Improvement Proposal, where we're assessing the viability of Arbitrum as the layer 2 solution, but it would still be a similar flow to where you'd transition GRT on Ethereum mainnet, bridge it over to Arbitrum. Right now it's Polygon. But again, we're working to abstract a lot of this behind the scenes, though it might take quite a bit of time.
Why not having the same system for each blockchain you're supporting?
Yeah, I mean, that's a thought. That's a lot of moving parts. And what we don't want is bridging risk. And bridging risk is obviously, let's say, the biggest risk. If you look at the amount lost in these hacks, the numbers are massive. So we want to minimize the moving parts as much as possible. Though to say, I love this feedback, give us this feedback in Discord again, or DM or whatever, because we take it super seriously. We're always looking at socials to see where the uncomfort is with regards to DX and UX. And we're taking note and we're keeping track, and we are prioritizing that over time. So the more feedback you have, the better. Even if it's something we can't do, at least we're looking at it and making sure we're let's say not trading off. We're prioritizing security and then making sure functionality works, and also ease of use in general for developers and users.
Okay, cool. I'm interested to hear about the future of the graph. What do we have down the road? What's coming up next? What's new?
Multiple things that are really fun. So the deprecation of the hosted service was something really exciting that the community's been waiting for a long time, which means we're going cross-chain on the network. We've announced one of probably the most exciting things with regards to developer expectations has been substreams. which is slightly changing the way that the graph is processing information, as opposed to right now, which is a linear model of processing. It's going to a parallelized data processing structure. And another big friction in the network in general is just indexing and syncing speed. And that's on the hosted service and the network. The network's faster than the hosted. But when substreams come in, that will likely 10 to 100x syncing and indexing speeds at scale. And that will usher in a new paradigm of speed and user ease that's going to really change the game and kind of set the graph apart to where no one will even try to compete, which is fun because it's good to have one place where everyone can build with data composability. That's another big part of substreams, to where you'll be able to leverage subgraph composability and data composability across chain. And there's some cool stuff on the graph blog about that. Just look at substreams, read all about it. If you want the docs to start to fiddle around and build with it, just let me know and send me a DM, Kyle, capital A Rojas on Twitter, and I'll send you the docs and you can start tooling around. And we could even loop a PM in if you're getting really interested. Besides that, I'd say it's moving to layer 2 Arbitrum. That's going to save a ton of money, to where, as opposed to costing maybe $40 to $70 to deploy a subgraph, it could cost $1 to $2. And if you think of that, that's going to make the entire system more efficient. For me as a delegator and curator, to indexers taking in allocations, to users having to deploy, create an API key, publish and curate, and so on, that will cost exponentially less money, which is an exciting thing as well. There's many other things that we're working on, such as shell proofs, which is a type of ZK solution in general that is going to change the game to exponentially decrease the amount of computations you'll need to do within a proof. And so that's really exciting. That's very complex, again, led by Zach Burns, as well as Jackson on the research team and others, and Semiotic Labs as well, who's a core dev, that are working on some solutions that are pretty groundbreaking that no one's ever really tackled. And that's going to lead to things like verifiable data, verifiable queries, which if you can imagine, if you could truly trust information on chain with no manual input from people, all based on verifiable math, that would kind of change the game and be a magnum opus for the graph ecosystem alone.
Sounds very exciting. Sounds amazing. The substream sounds really cool because one of the major pain points for using the graph is the long sync time, which is something we need to kind of think ahead before we deploy, before we make a new version, so on. So
yep, and you're not alone in that too. So we've come a long way, where sometimes it would have taken weeks at the beginning, and now it can maybe take days, but we want to go from days to hours or minutes. And that's important to really have this build out at scale. So we're working on it, and PM me or DM me after, and I can send you the docs so you can start fiddling around.
I'm curious, Kyle, why have you guys chosen Arbitrum? So there's, like, I suppose, 3 components to that question. Why Arbitrum? Do you think it makes sense to choose sort of one roll-up as the environment becomes increasingly, multi-chain and there's a proliferation of chains? Would you consider moving in the future? And if so, what would be the sort of drivers for such a decision, or not?
I'll start with the first 2 questions by saying that should be a decision or an explanation best given by the R&D team. And there's been a lot of thought and a lot of internal discussion, but I'll let some others like Brandon Ramirez, who's been leading R&D for a long time, opine on that. So I won't take that. But I will say that I don't think the graph will ever be in final form, to your third question. And if there are better solutions, more secure, faster, less expensive solutions, we will always consider them, because this always needs to be the fastest, least expensive, and most simple UI, UX, DX in general. So we'll always consider options down the line. But I'm kind of avoiding the question because there's been so much talk about this internally, and I'm not sure what I can say. So I'll let folks like Brandon and others opine on that later.
You mentioned that you were an indexer for the graph, or a curator. I can't remember which, or both. What, For indexes, what are the costs and the benefits? And can you talk a little bit more about like what being an indexer entails? And do all indexes necessarily make money, or is it kind of like you have to stake a certain amount of GRT, or are there other costs, and then you probably make money if you index good subgraphs, or what's that like?
Yeah, totally. So the three ways to participate, besides being a user and using the graph and paying GRT for query fees, is the simplest being a delegator or a staker, and that's just putting GRT onto an indexer to increase their capacity. The second is curator, and I'm a delegator and curator right now, and curators find subgraphs that are going to be popular, and they put GRT on there to attract indexers. So those are two very important economic models to scale as well as attract indexers. And if you think of indexers, they're the most technical, it's the most technical role for sure. And it's not as simple as running a simple validation node. You need to spin up an archive node, you need to spin up a graph node, and you need to run an indexing operation. So it's not something that you can just plug and play and forget about. It takes multiple hours to run on the back end, and you running your own infra in the back end know how hard and expensive it is, and that's if things don't go wrong and not getting the right information, or things shutting down and it bricking your front end. So these right now, there's 170 indexers, and there's going to be many more, are all essentially data operations. They're mini Googles that take a subgraph, which if you think of a subgraph, it's like a blueprint for what information someone wants from a blockchain. Or if you think of it as an Excel sheet, it's the labels on the columns and rows. And then the indexer comes in and with that blueprint builds the house with the information from the chain, or in Excel, it fills in all the rows and columns with those labels. So the subgraph is the blueprint, the indexer goes to the chain, gets all the historical information, and constantly, block by block, fills in that information ready to query at any moment. And that's why it's a DevOps lift, and that's why not everyone in the world wants to do it. And we wanted to make this a public good because it's such a huge lift for folks, and it's expensive, and DevOps hours are not cheap whatsoever if you look at the market. So yeah, running an archive node, spinning up graph node, and then constantly keeping it synced. And that's without redundancies, right? If you're thinking about redundancies with backups and so on. So there's lots of costs to consider. All that to say is that Index is probably one of the, if not the most lucrative participant role within the ecosystem. I would love to be part of, if not, even just a small part of an indexer operation one day to really understand from the inside out, even though I know firsthand what people are going through. So I'm excited to do that one day and participate as one of each of the three roles within the ecosystem.
Cool. So it sounds like an indexer is kind of doing what we're doing at the moment with the self-hosted subgraph, except they're, I guess, pulling the mappings files off of IPFS instead of uploading them themselves. Is that correct? So that, yeah.
That's exactly
and then obviously they're spinning up the
doing.
archive node, and yeah.
Yeah, to where you all would be good indexers, right? When RSKs, or if and when, I would say when RSKs integrated with the graph, you're going to need multiple indexers to serve every other dApp that comes on RSK and then wants to tap into the network, right? So you don't need one or two, you need tens or dozens or scores of indexers that can have the redundancy. Many indexers will be cross-chain, but they're going to be the backbone of serving this information to users to abstract the difficult DevOps tasks and everything else that comes along with it.
Cool. Remy, we should talk to DevOps about that. Our DevOps team has set up like a really, really nice deployment pipeline for us to be able to kind of deploy our subgraphs easily and have redundancies and put it behind a load balancer and all that kind of stuff.
I love it.
So yeah, like if RSK is on the decentralized network, I think that's something we'd definitely be interested in doing for our subgraph and probably other RSK subgraphs also.
Sweet. Let's hop in a chat later on. I'll loop in some of the folks that can help you understand. Again, it'd be a ways away, but never know. Things can change quickly, and also time goes extremely fast in crypto.
Yeah, for sure. Do you find that you often have multiple indexes indexing the same chains? If there's like, I don't know, not the same chains, the same subgraphs, like Uniswap subgraph, for example, I imagine is probably one of the most popular subgraphs to be queried. So would you have like maybe 5-6 different indexes? And if you do, how would front ends decide which one to query? Or is there a way to kind of like direct that query to the indexer that has the most capacity or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you think about the point of curation, it's to attract indexers. And if you have a good amount of curation, let's say 8,000 to 10,000 GRT in a subgraph, you'll likely have 15 to 20 subgraphs. The redundancy there, at least 10, if not 15 to 20 subgraphs indexing that particular subgraph with no cost to the user. It's only when they actually using queries do they pay the query fees, again, in weekly invoices to the indexers. Yeah, 10 to 20 is a good number. At some, when there's a really high amount of curation, it gets up to many, many indexers, but there's 170 indexers across the ecosystem, the network now, and there'll be many more. So they want to make sure they spread their capacity across subgraphs. But that's the point of the network, to where if one subgraph goes out, there'll be dozens ready to pick up the slack immediately. And you're asking how that happens. It's not a manual thing. It's based in the protocol in what's called an indexer selection algorithm. And users can pick anything from data freshness to price to economic security, meaning how much stake an indexer has in the protocol, and other things to prioritize. A lot of people prioritize for price, but a lot of people just want the best data freshness. And it depends on what you're doing and how many nines you need and so on. So that happens instantly in the protocol based on the indexer selection algorithm. That's working really well. So not only selecting who is giving the best quality of service at the best price, depending on the traits that a user selects, but also where in the world that indexer is located. If somebody's in Africa, they might route to an African indexer, which there are multiple in Africa, or East Asia, or parts of Europe, and so on. So it all factors in, and it happens in an instant. And the latency's really good on the network, 100 to 200 milliseconds. If you think of 100 milliseconds as imperceptibly immediate. So even 150 to 250 millisecond latency is pretty good. Still can get better though.
Yeah, that's very cool. You made kind of like a CDN of all of the indexes to minimize routing time. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. And it's still early, right? It's not even close to final form. There's so much that can happen. This is going to keep us busy for 3 to 5 years.
Where do you see the space going based on current trends? Any observation on your end?
As a DeFi nerd, longtime DeFi nerd, and still very happy a non-participant in the space. I've seen it from the traditional finance space and the crypto native space. And I'd say decentralized finance is probably the best product market fit and the most effective red pill for this entire space for the world right now. Right? DeFi is eating the world's AUM, or assets under management, and we're just calling it TVL, total value locked. And I think it's pretty easy to see that. Let's say when you look back 2.5 years ago, probably, I think blockchain TVL was around 600 to 700 million at the beginning of 2020, which is a lot of money. But I think in December of 2021, 2 years later, that got up to 180 billion with a B, right? Over 250x in 2 years. And even with the dirty bear market hovering over us right now, we're still sitting at something like 60 billion TVL. That's 80 to 85x, I think, from the original. So as far as what I see beyond that, beyond DeFi eating the world's money, I see the biggest brand names in media, entertainment, food and beverage, and many of their verticals building Web3 teams. I see the largest financial institutions in the world not only looking at the space, but adopting it, right? Building out entirely new branches within their centuries-old organizations to adapt to this shift. So again, DeFi is the crypto red pill for this world. It's proving the product market fit for the ecosystem, and it's paving the way for the disruption of large swaths of the world that I think really need to happen, because the incentive structure right now is messed up. It is, and I've seen it from the inside out in the military and Wall Street. So it's extremely important. It's exciting, and I feel lucky to be a participant.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with where you said. I think the increase in the amount of money that's moving into DeFi from traditional finance is really amazing, and I think the fact that so much of that, so much of those funds are staying there through the bear market, is really showing that there is this product market fit, that, people weren't just there to make, really quick gains or whatever. People really are disillusioned with the traditional system. And I think increasingly, it's becoming more and more obvious and more felt by individual people how that system is failing. And I think inflation is a really big example of that. I think, more like I'm from the UK and this is really the first point in my life when people in the UK are really feeling the first point that I can really remember where people are really feeling inflation like on a personal level. And I think, that kind of issue is becoming more and more unavoidable to people. And I think also like in terms of the future of DeFi and what I think is so cool about the graph is I think, so many protocols are kind of decentralized but not fully decentralized, right? Or want to be more decentralized, but there wasn't the tools to do that yet, or it was too much of a friction for user experience or things like this, or we still have like a bunch of off-chain backend services and things like that. But with tools like the graph that make it so much easier and more seamless to really have decentralized infrastructure, I think the space is going to become increasingly decentralized and with that increasingly hard to stop and increasingly hard to for anyone to take down and it'll just kind of become more and more robust over time.
Brilliant. So audience, if you're listening and you have the Twitter mobile app, request to be a speaker if you have any questions, and we'll have you on while time permits. In the meantime, Kyle, any questions for Sovryn or the folks we have on stage, so to speak, with us?
I have a question for you. What's new on your end? I'd love to hear what's on your roadmap. I haven't been able to pay attention to things in the space for the past few quarters. So I'd love to hear what's next for you all, what your plans are, if there's any shifts and how you're dealing with the bear market in general.
Sovryn is growing right now. And the reason it's growing is because if you're asking about a shift, I think there's a broader shift which needs to happen for DeFi to become valuable and to become what you were describing as sort of like this red pill. And that is a shift from DeGenFi to sound finance to SoundFi. It's always the case that the earliest adopters are, the people who have the highest degree of risk tolerance and the highest desire for innovation. But the vast majority of the population, and certainly the vast majority of savers and investors the world over, are far more interested in stability, in the long term, and in wealth preservation first, and then earning second. And so Sovryn, from its very inception, has been a project which has made architectural choices time and again around providing for sound finance. So the smart contracts very early on were designed not to rely on a multi-sig, but to be managed by a large body of stakers in the form of the Batocracy. The system was designed to be economically self-sustaining in the form of revenue being distributed to stakers. And then there are other core architectural decisions, like the fact that Sovryn is built on rootstock because it's merge mined with Bitcoin and uses Bitcoin as the primary asset, since that is the slowest moving and as a result most reliable asset or permaware in the system, like in the crypto economy. And then there are other architectural decisions that we've made that I think we can be very proud of. So one of them, for example, was turning centralized stablecoins into second-class citizens, and in fact not having users interact directly with centralized stablecoins at all. So all centralized stablecoins, as they're brought into the Sovryn ecosystem, go through an aggregator and are aggregated into a single decentralized stablecoin called XUSD. And the biggest driver of growth right now for Sovryn is a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, which provides for a high degree of decentralized assurances. So I think in terms of the mission that we're all on, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce dependencies. With you guys, one of the big dependencies that data is extremely important and data availability is extremely important. It's becoming more and more obvious that that's the case. And so your mission is to reduce dependencies on that type of data availability. With Sovryn broadly, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build an ecosystem which eliminates and build a community which places a premium on eliminating systemic risk and systemic dependencies, which are basically the same thing. And what we've recently saw with OFAC blacklisting Tornado Cash, and as a result, the fact that it was then blacklisted by the primary stablecoin in DeFi, that is the type of systemic risk that we're looking to avoid. So we've seen growth as a result of these architectural changes, I think, in the bear market, and because of the recent release of Zero, which is a new protocol for borrowing against Bitcoin. And our goal is to continue to try and focus on making those long-term architectural choices, which make the system more and more robust and reduce any centralized or systemic risks. And talking about what I think are the what will need to be the trends in DeFi going forward. I think we've exhausted to a great extent our ability to, and it will come back to one degree or another in the next bull market, but every time it sort of comes back a little less vociferously. We've somewhat exhausted the ability to build out economies just on the basis of token issuance. We need to start building and focusing more on those tools which provide sort of everyday, real economic value. And that's going to be a substantial march, but I think that's the march that takes us to DeFi eating the world.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. I applaud you for the values orientation and maintaining it. I think it's really important.
Thank you, guests. Does anyone have anything else to add before we close out? All right, well, that wraps it up, everyone. Thank you very much, Kyle, for joining us. You can find him at Kyle A. Rojas here on Twitter. Everyone, you can follow us as well at Sovryn BTC if you want to keep up to date with us. Betsy, Iago, Remy, thank you very much for joining us as well. Guys, tomorrow we're having our community call. Be sure to tune in for that. Also afterwards, a little bit later, we're having a Q&A, the second Q&A session about Zero with John Light. That should be a good time. Lots of good questions in there if you want to learn more about the Zero protocol. Thank you, guests.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Stay sovereign.
Thank you. Stay sovereign.
Stay sovereign.